we'll just get this. Oh, it is? Okay. There we go. Whoa, that's loud. Here, let's get this going. I think I like the other microphone, but that's okay. Actually, can I use that microphone, or this one's really loud? Oh, okay, sorry, then I'll just stick with this one. That's okay. Hey everybody, it's Andrew. I'm the CEO of ExamPro. Today's April 18, 2019. This talk is for the Serverless Toronto User Group. And the talk today is the fast track to serverless security on AWS. So if you are studying for the security specialty AWS certification, there is some good knowledge in here for you where you can try to apply this knowledge in the AWS platform to help you ace that exam. These are the services that we're going to be covering, so there's a lot on our list. I did recently do an AWS security talk, so I'm going to try to avoid talking about the things that I talked about previous in depth, so that you can, if you want to brush up on more security services, you can watch that video, which I have on YouTube, and this one will go on YouTube as well. But the focus of this talk is really going to be about securing your Lambda functions and some fundamental security knowledge. And since we're talking about the fundamentals of security knowledge, I want to first introduce you to OWASP if you're not familiar with it. So OWASP is an open web application security project. So it's like a nonprofit or nonprofit. I always get them mixed up. But the idea is that there's a bunch of contributors that build out these security projects, both like apps and documents. You can utilize that stuff to have better security practices. So you definitely want to check out OWASP. And they also, it's a security community, so if you want to ask questions in security, there's people way smarter than I am on there, so I definitely suggest you check out the OWASP community. But their most popular product is this PDF, and it's called OWASP Top 10. So it's the top 10 most critical web application security risks. I feel like there's more than 10 in that list. I think there's like 12 or something, or there's always like 2 tacked on from other people. But you'll see this list quite frequently if you're trying to look up serverless security, because most of it's applicable. It's also applicable to regular or traditional security. I'm not going to be going through all these points because this PDF is really good, and I do suggest for you to read this document. We'll be indirectly covering some of these things in this talk today, but I just want to show you how detailed that PDF is, just to give you a peek inside that PDF. So, you know, if they have a scenario for like injection, they really give you a good example of each type of exploit or attack and how to prevent it, and a very good example of the attack. And also they have a lot of references in terms of variations, so that if you really want to master all these things and not have a problem with them, this is a really good document to check out. So the first service I want to tell you about is Kms Key Management Service. So it's a multi-tenant HSMs. HSM stands for Hardware Security Module. If you're not familiar with HSMs, think of it as a piece of hardware that's in the data center, and it protects your keys. So the idea is that you encrypt data, and data is encrypted with keys, but how do you know your keys are safe? Well, that's where an HSM comes into play. But KMS is a multi-tenant HSM, so that means it's shared with other AWS accounts. And so if you're enterprise and you're really concerned about that, they do have a dedicated HSM service, which is more expensive, but for enterprise it's highly affordable. I always forget the name of it, Cloud HSM. But anyway, if you do want to use KMS and you want to import your own keys, they're $1 per key. And I believe AWS has managed keys, and I'm pretty sure those are free to use. So you are already off to a good start for securing your data. The way I like to describe KMS is always like a checkbox in the AWS system. So here I have 3 AWS services, and they all utilize KMS. So anytime you have the ability to checkbox security, it's most likely using KMS, and you can select a managed KMS key or use one of the imported keys and utilize it there. So they're like, you have an S3 bucket, and I'm turning on KMS, or we're in parameter store, and we are utilizing KMS. So that's a really good service to know if you're studying for the security specialty. Definitely you need to know that inside and out. So I said this talk was about securing AWS Lambda functions, and so you know, we could go through a big list of it, but these are the most ones I want you to know, and so we're going to jump in and go through these things. So the first thing I want to tell you about securing your Lambda function is that let's say you have a Lambda function and its job is to process images. So you're using Node.js, and if you're using Node.js, you probably use like a library like Sharp.js, which processes images. How do you know that library is safe? okay? Because if it's a third-party open source library and I'm a malicious person, I could come in and try to sneak in open source code, and maybe the people aren't getting paid a lot on that open source project, so they let it slip by. And so, there are a few tools out there. This one's called Sneak. I know it's hard to determine how to pronounce it, but I assume it must be Sneak because that makes sense. But what their tool does is it will scan third-party dependencies. There's a few other ones on the market. I like this one because it does all the runtimes, and my favorite runtime is Ruby, and they do Ruby, and that's why I highlighted it. But just to give you an idea how you would integrate that into your application, let's say you're using GitHub. So in GitHub, when you have a pull request, you can have these checks. And so Sneak in the GitHub store, you can press a button. And now before you merge that pull request, that has to pass. So it'll check vulnerabilities for whatever runtime you want. So that's a really good one. Here's another scenario for your Lambda function. So let's say we have a file and we want this file, when it goes S3, we want to send it to a Lambda function, and the Lambda function is going to store its name in, let's say, Aurora serverless database. So I'm not sure if this is still an issue, but there's an exploit where you can name a file and literally put SQL in it. And let's say you name the file deletes all from users table, and you put in that S3 bucket, and so that S3 bucket triggers a Lambda, and so you need to read some event data or metadata about the title because you want to insert it into your database. So the issue here is that if you do not sanitize that event data, because you wouldn't think like any malicious data would be coming through there. It's a really niche scenario, but the point is that you should treat event data like as you need to sanitize it. So that's a interesting one to watch out for. This one is a bit obvious, but it's worth repeating. It's kind of like the thing about you should never use your root account, which I'm always guilty of because it's really easy to do, but don't use your root account. This is another case where it's like IAM policies. It's just that sometimes it's a pain to determine exactly what rules you need. If you ever use code pipeline and you had to write policies for that, it's like pulling out your hair because, and then you just say everything. But anyway, just as a case, let's say you have an attacker and they somehow got malicious code into your Lambda function. You want to minimize damage they can do. So because when you give them you give them ammunition. They could delete, they can do anything to your bucket or whatever permissions you have. So, lock them down. Right, so here we have before it has everything, and on the one on the right hand says you can just get the objects from the bucket and you can list it. Way less damage. So just give them only what they're allowed to do. Another thing is about keeping our secrets a secret. Do not store your secrets in your code. Environment variables is a step up, but if you really want to secure your secrets, there's 3 ways you can store them in AWS. These are 2 managed services: SSM, which is Simple Systems Manager, Parameter Store, and Secrets Manager. Very similar services. One is free, one is paid. The paid one is not that expensive, and it does come with a few bells and whistles. One thing I really like about it is that it has RDS integration, meaning like, let's say you have a key that you want to rotate out for your RDS instance. You can use Secrets Manager for that. The third option is you could put your secrets in an S3 bucket as a file, encrypt them, and so when that file, when you want to pull these secrets, you can pull them, through the CLI or whatever from your Lambda function, and that is a much nicer way to protect your secrets. I do want to point out, like, this might be more important for people like working in government or whatever, or like enterprises. But if you want to know Lambda compliancy, these are what they are compliant with. So SOC 1 to SOC 3, PCI DSS. HIPAA, which is the health insurance, et cetera, I'm pretty sure. And so if you want to have proof that AWS is compliant, there is a service called AWS Artifact, which is a fun way of trying to get access to these documents. They have to click through 3 links to get to them. But if you need to prove it to someone in upper management that they are compliant, that's the service that you'll use for that. And so I also want to tell you that there are a couple really cool services that you can utilize in your serverless stack to use machine learning to help out to make sure things are secure. Those 2 are GuardDuty and Macey. So GuardDuty is it will analyze your flow logs, which I'll show you in a second, and Macey, it will check your S3 buckets and stuff about users to make sure that there's no funny business going on with your S3 account. But I'll show you more detail here. So, I mean, this is an old example. I didn't have time to spin up a Lambda to take a new screenshot for you, but this is on an EC2 instance, but Lambda's run EC2, so I think this example is kind of valid. But, you know, GuardDuty would analyze your flow logs and report back stuff to you. I'm just not sure what it would show for Lambda functions. And what's really cool about GuardDuty is it's another place to remind you not to use root account credentials. There's like 5 apps that tell you stop using root account. And I'm pretty sure I'm using root account on this. So. But anyway, so that's a really cool service. And I always like to point out on GuardDuty that if you want to whitelist or determine the threats, like and have know who they are, because it's always an exam question on that. So I just show that to show you in GuardDuty that you can either whitelist or blacklist certain IPs in GuardDuty. And just let's go take a look here at Macey. So, you know, I said Macey is using ML against your S3 buckets and users. And so here's the dashboard, but I want to zoom up onto this one and just give you an idea of what something Macey can do. So here we have like these colors, and for some reason Platinum, I would think Bronze would be the worst, but Platinum is the worst user. So this is an IAM user role, has a history of making high-risk API calls and should be monitored closely for signs of account compromise. So let's say you have, you know, juniors in the account and they don't know what they're doing and they're doing really funny things. Well, it's going to point out the users where there's trouble in your buckets, or with like accessing files in S3. And another good point is to show off alerts, because it gives you an idea of the kind of ML stuff that Macey can do to protect you. You know, like whether it's ransomware or stuff. I haven't had a good use case for Macey, but as far as I remember reading about it, it's like, let's say you had, I always use this example, like say you had credit card playing data in your AWS, your S3 bucket as a file. I would think that Macey would detect that and then tell you about it, and maybe let's say, hey, you got really sensitive data and it's not encrypted. Maybe you should make sure your juniors don't have access to that, right? So that's Macey there. WAF is an extremely important service to know for security on AWS. It's one of my favorite services, and there's a lot to know about it. Where it applies for serverless is that you can use it in 2 places, in front of an ALB and CloudFront. You might not know this because I didn't know until recently, but I think it was like in 2018, November, you can actually have ALB, your Elastic Load Balancer, trigger Lambda functions. And so there's 2 places to attach a WAF. You can attach it on ALB or you can attach it on CloudFront, okay? And I do like to point out that, you know, if you were using WAF with API Gateway, you see how it says 10K requests per second for API Gateway. So let's say you're getting DDoS and you have a lot of traffic. I'm pretty sure that default throttle would help you out so that your Lambdas wouldn't be overused and you'd be spending a lot of money. There's like an acronym that's like there's DDoS, but there's like DOW, which is like denial of wallet. Because if a lot of Lambdas get spinned up, it's going to cost you a lot of money. So I like to think that that's like a safeguard there for you. But I just wanted to show you a quick peek into WAF. So with WAF, you have ACLs, and ACLs have rules, and rules have conditions. An ACL costs $5, and one rule costs $1. If you're a really small startup, you might be paying $6 to $7, which seems like a lot per month, but it's definitely worth it. But you know, I just want to show you the marketplace. So let's say you have all these rules. Actually, I want to talk a little about the rules here. So you know, some things in WAF that you could do is like, you know, let's say you have a lot of bots. So you know, I get a lot of bots that are just trying to scrape my website or look at my stuff, or they're just making my roll bar go crazy because there's so many requests to pages that don't exist. So you could use WAF to check the user agent, and if it's one that's utilized by scrapers or crawlers, you can ignore them. You could use geo matching to say if we don't expect traffic from outside of Canada or US, or like from a region, we can ignore that data. And there's a lot of cool ways of filtering out data. But I do want to point out the marketplace, because the marketplace is a good place if you don't have confidence of how to set up WAF, because it can be complicated. And if you just want to use something off the shelf, AWS has partnered with specific security companies, so not anyone can just publish on this. There's only like 7 well-known security companies, and so you can use a combination of these managed rules to get up and going. They can cost between $20 to $100 per month. If you're an enterprise, it's a no-brainer to use these things. If you're smaller, I might have a cheaper solution for you. But I do want to point out that we see the word OWASP repeated multiple times here. So OWASP is super important, and you'll see that all security companies like to tote it as like, this is super important. And so I was talking about that cheaper solution. So AWS actually has a CloudFormation template for setting up your WAF security rules, and comes with a few other bells and whistles. So if you need a starting point, you want something more complex, it's really cool. I would suggest opening up the CloudFormation template, and if you know how to read them, you can see some pretty cool things in there. I think there's like a honeypot and a few other functionalities in there. So I would definitely suggest checking that out. They also have, and I'll point this out later, but they actually have a white paper specific to WAF and how it applies to OWASP, which is like another, them going through the top 10 OWASP, but from the AWS perspective, and how to apply it in WAF. So that's pretty cool too. So you could use that in combination with this to try to make your own practical version if you are really strapped for cash. And here's me pointing actually out those white papers. So if you want to do a little bit more study on security, these are 4 white papers I do recommend. The one on the end there, I actually made a video recently on YouTube. So if you do not like reading and you want to watch it very quickly, that one's on specifically Lambda security. So, you know, I don't cover as much as I can here, but I get to talk a lot more about Lambda security there. Serverless application lens, which is kind of like well-architected framework, but it's more serverless specific. It has a nice little section on security in there. I think that's good. The security pillar, it's not serverless specific, but it's a very good read. And then the last one there, which I just recommended to you, which was use AWS WAF to migrate OWASP top 10 web application vulnerabilities. Very good to read it. But they're on the ExamPro website, but I'm sure Daniel will send out a link to you so you can find these cool resources. And I probably will soon make videos for all these so you do not have to read white papers. So let's say, so we talked, I was showing you that there is, in the marketplace for WAF, there was an easy way to get set up for WAF if you don't have the confidence or you want the convenience. You have the same thing for Lambda functions. So you know how I showed you, and I didn't show you all the possible exploits, but I showed you enough scenarios of things that you have to worry about. So so if you want to just have someone else do the work for you, there are AWS Lambda partners, and there's these 4 security partners specifically with AWS Lambda, and we have Protego, I always think it's like Protect, so it must be Protego, PureSec, which we heard about earlier, and Twistlock. And you'll notice that it says Lambda layer. So if you want to easily integrate these into your Lambda functions, I don't know if you ever used Lambda layers, but it's like, I wish I had a screenshot of this, but it's like a zip, but it's not part of your main Lambda function that you zip. You can just add it on. It has all the dependencies, and it can integrate with these services. I think most of these have a free tier. So if you need to get started and you're worried about costs, I would just give them a go, but you might have to go through some sales. You're probably going to give your phone number, and they're going to talk to you. So there's that. But, you know, just to give you an idea what they do more in depth, I'll actually show you kind of the scope of them. They all kind of do similar things, but I'll just show you PureSec because he needs some help selling his product. So I figured I'd tell you a little bit more about it. So PureSec, they have their main product, which is the serverless security platform. It's for AWS Lambda. And so it seamlessly integrates with your CI and CD. So remember when we saw how Sneak would work with GitHub, which is kind of like CI/CD. I imagine that there's some kind of integration that way. So I'm sure they have the most common CI/CDs covered for that, for integration. You know, I said earlier how much of a pain it is to actually, you know, when you have IAM roles or policies and you need to pare them down to exactly what they are, but sometimes it's a chore. Well, one of their tools does that. So let's say you have over-permissive rules. They will analyze it, determine what you should only have access to, and pare it down for you. That's really nice. They check insecure storage of your apps. So that's basically, I guess that's similar to what I showed you with, you know, storing secrets or whatever, or maybe Macey. Sorry, that would be more equivalent of Macey, right? But from a Lambda perspective, I suppose. They scan known vulnerabilities for third-party dependencies. That's similar to Sneak again. They don't support all the same runtimes as Sneak, but Sneak does specialize in this. So, but you know, if you're trying to buy into this kind of ecosystem, it's nice that they have that in there. Serverless application firewall, I really do want to talk about this because there's another exploit that you have to worry about. So I'm going to go back to this slide to help you contextualize it. So, you know, so WAF, what it does is any request that comes through WAF, like it will check it, make sure it's okay, and if it is, it sends it along. If it's not, it's fine. So this works really well if you're using only API gateway or only ALB. But what happens when a Lambda trigger is triggered by the 100 other AWS services? It's not 100, but it's high. The multiple AWS services, you don't get that WAF protection, right? So there's nothing that runs in the Lambda function and screens out stuff. So going back over here, apparently they have a serverless application firewall. I haven't tried it out yet, but it sounds cool. And so the idea is that no matter where your Lambda function gets triggered, it will protect you like a WAF. They have a behavioral protection engine, and it detects whether there's funny business going in your app. So if your app is doing something unusual, it's not supposed to be doing it, they'll tell you about it, and they have like a visual visibility dashboard notification. So any of these 3 providers, I don't know about the 4th one up to there, but they all have similar functionality. So if you need to get going, I think it's a good idea. I would recommend it. I do want to point out one more thing. So if you are looking to study more about serverless security, and I did recommend you the white papers, I do have some videos for you. And I would also recommend these 4 videos up here. So I'm not trying to plug PureSec, but they actually happen to be, like, anytime you Google serverless security, you're going to end up on their page anyway. So I'm just going to tell you to go here anyway. But they have 4 really good 1-hour long talks where they go through various exploits in more detail than I am, and they're more experts of it than I am. So if you need more additional information, go check that out. And now we're on to questions.
Thank you. Thank you. So anybody wants mic? So the idea was there is so much fear of the cloud itself, and especially with the serverless where you cannot SSH, like you need to see what's happening and how companies can help you. And no questions? We move
any questions?
If you don't, we can have
anything you want to ask. It could be even about Game of Thrones. As long as everyone's up to speed, right?
So with serverless, one of the things is the thing you talked about, the wallet being empty, right? So how does zipping protections help you against that? Because you'd still be making those requests, right?
Oh, sorry. Say that one more time. Are we talking about layers?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, are the layers secure?
So when you embed code which has security protections or whatever into your Lambda, how does that prevent against you getting DDoSed and ending up with a huge bill?
So I mean, DDoS is a different story, right? So if you're being DDoSed, what's going to protect you there is CloudFront and WAF and Shield. So on AWS, you already have a service in there called Shield that already protects against, I think, layer 3 and 4 or something. And then if you want to pay more money, it's like 1,000 or something, you get layer 7 protection. So AWS already has built-in DDoS protection in the system. So it's not something you really need to worry about. Also, there's other ways you can mitigate DDoS, such as utilizing CloudFront, because then you're caching stuff, so it's not really hitting your endpoints. And then obviously distributing the load. So as long as you have your Lambdas in front of CloudFront or an ALB, and you're using WAF, right? And you have AWS Shield for free, or you have the paid one, you're going to be okay for DDoS. So, yep. But their tools, like when I showed you those two with the layers and stuff, they're not specific to DDoS. So, any other questions? Yep.
Could you elaborate more on serverless? Okay, just speak louder.
Well, it's okay. I'll repeat the question here.
Serverless firewall, my assumption is that something like that would be useful only if you have pretty broad permissioning given to Lambda. Otherwise, your vault should catch.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like paranoia, right? It's like you probably don't need it in most scenarios. I mean, I haven't actually used it. I just know about it for serverless application firewall. But even when I was thinking about it, I'm going, well, what's the likelihood of you actually needing to utilize this? I don't know. So I think it's just paranoia, for such a utility. It's also like like the data events. Like, what's the likelihood of someone actually manipulating those, right? It's just covering your bases, right? Yep.
I have a quick question. So I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you
for sharing all this great information. I know in the enterprise cybersecurity world, all security decisions are based on risk. I was wondering if there are any services in AWS which or provided by a partner service which provides that a risk-based analysis on, so that companies can de-risk themselves by adding appropriate controls. So as you mentioned, defense in depth is one of the things like paranoia, but then like a service which could enable a company to make security decisions based on risk?
Based on risk. Honestly, I don't even know how to answer that one. Alan, you think you can help me out? Alan's like really smart, so we'll ask Alan.
Not with that. I think really kind of risk is a really hard thing to automate with a lot of things. I think probably the approach I'd have to look at is kind of threat modeling. You know, if I have, and it doesn't kind of matter what the application and the security model of the application looks like. If I have 2 users that use that application once a year and just to look up what movies are there versus, you know, banks with financial transaction processing, they're different, you know, use cases, different impact possibilities, and then the architectures kind of go along with it. I don't know if there is really a great answer around that. There are some tools that are probably out there that may be able to help with some, you know, automating a little bit of the threat modeling piece around it, but I don't know that I've seen anything that's kind of an end-to-end solution around that, unfortunately.
What do you think we move to Mike's talk now, and then after everything? Okay, last one.
Okay, last question.
So, quick question about the third-party thing that scans the third-party libraries.
Sneak, yep.
Yeah, Sneak. So, does it do code analysis or black box testing?
I'm not actually sure how it works. I just know it gives you a number and says it's secure or not secure. It's vulnerable or not vulnerable.
No worries, I was just curious.
Yep.
So let's move now to Mike's talk. Like, it's going to be less technical, more educational about the funding you can get from Amazon. Is that okay? Okay. So what happens, like, it was important to cover security. Again, people are afraid of it, especially with serverless. The point here to take, there are tools to help. There are people who can help you. So don't be afraid, test it out. So that's not, fear is not a reason not to use technology. And now like I worked in a couple of startups, and Mike did as well. It wasn't easy to find all the information out there, how to help startups. So Mike and I have been kind of planning this for a long time, and he pulled out everything that Amazon has to offer you, and hopefully your startups or people that need money and help can benefit from this. This is a journey like that we started last time with Alan's talk. We are not stopping here. We're going to proceed with government funds, with Mars, Innovation Center. So we just want to help you be successful, because it's hard enough to create something new and then kind of to have success with that. And we are technologists, but we are not about technology alone. The goal is not technology. We're building cars for other people to drive. So let's help the drivers. So that's my point. So.
And I pass over the torch.
Thank you. Thanks. Great presentation. Really interested in the security side of serverless myself. Let me move this chair out of the way because I don't want to sit on it. So if I end up blocking the slides because I have a tendency to wander, just someone give me like a nod or a wave and tell me to move over. So nice to be here. Thank you, Daniel, for the invitation. You might be wondering a little bit, you know, why a startup solution architect is here at a serverless meetup. Daniel alluded to that a little bit. You know, we see, or I see day to day, startups doing a lot of innovative stuff in the serverless space, both at the compute layer and all through the stack, because they have that luxury of starting, you know, fresh, starting cloud native. So I think there is a fair amount of overlap between the serverless stacks and the customers that we work with in the startup team. You know, my goal today was to really just bring some information for you guys so you know what's out there. I'm new to the startup team at AWS. The team has people on the ground in Canada now for the first time. I'm one of those people, so we're just trying to build awareness. A lot of this is actually an interest on my part in hearing from you guys as to how we can help you. So our mandate on the team, the startup team, is basically to enable the Canadian startup ecosystem in any way that we can, in any way that we can help. So that is basically what I'm going to talk about today. And then some of the programs that we have in place that maybe have benefited some of the people here. I noticed a few of you mentioned that you're either working for a startup today. Some of you may be involved with startups in the future. So you know, reach out, let me know what resonates with you, and let me know sort of where the gaps are from your perspective on where we can help you. The sort of synergy that I talked about between startups and serverless, it goes right back to the beginnings of AWS public cloud, I think, as well, right? So our mission at the beginning of all this, before serverless was even a thing, was about driving the cost to innovate out of IT infrastructure, giving our customers agility, letting them run experiments, letting those experiments fail if necessary, and letting that all happen very quickly and very inexpensively. And those are all core tenets of serverless as well. Focusing on your special sauce, so what you do that makes your business unique and brings value to your customers. So these are very, very like common principles between those two domains. You know, when we got into this game, we saw the cost of basically launching a technology startup plummet precipitously. I built my first startup back in the late 90s, so I was living in the world on the left there, where you're racking servers and colo data centers and running around fixing cables and trying to keep monitors from falling off of shelves and things like that. So the transformation over the last, well, I'm going to age myself here, but the transformation over the last 25 years has been really incredible to watch. And to know that some of the businesses that we built 20 years ago with several hundred employees by the end of the day, you could re-execute those types of ideas today, with a 2-person team or a 1-person team. So it's helping enable that type of rapidity to innovation that we're focused on our team. So that principle of focusing on what makes you special and removing operational burden is really what serverless is all about. A lot of time gets spent talking about Lambda on the compute side, but keep perspective on pushing operational responsibility across the entire stack out of your day-to-day life. So whether that's compute, and we will include services like Fargate in this as well, or whether it's at the data tier, the storage tier, the messaging tier, and then there are things even beyond that. I heard someone talking already about Amplify, I think, today. So consider the entire stack when you think about serverless and how you're going to spend time focusing on the areas that really matter to you. So these are really things that could apply to either startups or serverless, right? Removing your responsibility to think about scaling, to think about infrastructure. A lot of the security is done for you, but as we spent already half an hour talking about today, it doesn't alleviate you of responsibility completely, right? So just understand where that line is between the provider and yourself, but that line moves very, very high up the stack when you get into the serverless space. So with that being said, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about our team, like why we're here, right? So the startup team at Amazon is a global org. I mentioned that we now have people on the ground here in Toronto, which is fantastic. My partner in the team, Andrea Baptiste, on the business development side is based out of Ottawa, but she spends a lot of time in Toronto as well. And our team globally is basically a large group of former CEOs, CTOs, tech startup founders. We've all been through various exits. We've all sort of earned the scars that come with this process. So, our mission basically is to provide mentorship and guidance and support to startups that are starting to walk down that same path. The team is one that can provide you networking connections into all kinds of different places that you may have trouble getting to on your own, right? So it's not just about technical support, and there is plenty of that, and I am on the technology side of the business, so I'm not trying to sell myself short here, but we do a lot of work on the business development side, on fundraising, coaching, all those types of processes as well. So this goes fairly broad outside of just the technical side of things. So we have very strong relationships with the startup ecosystem. Most of these logos here are going to be a little bit more US focused. Is that? Nope. I don't know what that is. So most of these logos are a little bit more US focused, but we work very closely with accelerators, with incubators, with scale-ups, with venture capitalists, private equity, and that is where normally most of our relationships with startups are formed. So it doesn't mean that there can't be a direct relationship, but typically we come to meet our customers through their involvement in these types of programs. So if you have questions about these types of programs, that is another area where we can help you, right? So if you have an idea, if you're at the napkin phase of the process and you literally have no idea what comes next, these are some of the questions that we can also provide guidance to you on. So not just on how do I build this business from a technically sustainable perspective, but how do I even take the next step from where I am today? I thought I would just spend a little bit of time on some of the terminology here, because if you're not familiar with the industry, this can be a little bit confusing and bewildering the first time you look at it. So most startups go through this journey where they start with the idea on a napkin, and they're down sort of at the incubator phase here at the bottom. So these are the way we sort of see startups get bucketed and the way they progress up the ladder in their journey, right? They don't all start at the bottom. Some steps get skipped, but this is kind of the process that most startups go through. So they have an idea and they need to turn that into an MVP. So they'll look for some sort of incubation center, which is going to give them some guidance and some resource to help them sort of figure out what MVP looks like and get the initial product at the door. Then they may move from there to an accelerator. The goal of the accelerator is really to be super focused on what you're doing with your startup at that point. Take your MVP and find product market fit. So that means that now you have customers using the product, you have customers paying for the product, and you're sort of getting to that phase where you're looking at possibly pivoting or refining, stripping things out, adding a couple key pieces, but you're really looking at that point to build a legitimate and sustainable offering to your customers. And then from there, you have the growth phase, right? So you start looking at companies that are going to join scale-ups. They're starting to hire, potentially hiring into the tens to hundreds of people. They're looking to raise possibly Series A, Series B type money, and they're looking at annual revenues of over $1 million. And then from there, they just continue. So that's sort of what the typical journey for a startup looks like, from idea on a napkin through to a name that you then become familiar with. Don't try and read anything on the slide. The point of the slide is just to illustrate that the Toronto and the Canadian startup ecosystem is quite broad. None of this existed when we were doing this back in the 90s, so or very little of it did. So there are a ton of resources out there, starting right at the bottom from programs like Mars Start. You can see by the number of icons on the slide, there are a ton of options here. This is, again, something that we are more than happy to help you navigate. So if you're trying to figure out who are the people I call, where are the resources I can draw on in the ecosystem at large, we can help point you to the right people and make sure that you're focused on the right conversations. And Peter as well can help with this type of question. So what do we actually do? So we've talked about the ecosystem a little bit. I want to make it sort of very clear what we don't do, which is not very much, and what we do. So I get this question a lot. We do not invest in startups. So we do not have a venture arm directly. And we consider our partnership with the ecosystem to be how we enable startups through this process. So we do that by investing resource. The startup team talks about investing irrationally in our customers. Right? So you may not be billing hundreds of thousands of dollars on the platform, but we're going to treat you the same as any of those large customers because we believe in the potential of the startups that are working with us. We try and make connections, as I talked about, so opening doors both internally within Amazon and externally in the ecosystem, and basically giving you all the tools that you need to be successful over the long term. Specifically on the technical side, we mentioned in the last talk the serverless lens for the well-architected framework. So we look at programs like that. We look at ensuring that you guys are set up for success from a security perspective, from a runway optimization perspective, so that you're not spending money unnecessarily. Whatever money you've managed to raise in your hard-fought funding process lasts for as long as possible. And we make sure that you understand how to sort of work through the platform from a best practices perspective. On the BD side, there are co-marketing programs, funding opportunities, referrals into enterprise customers. So those are some of the programs I'm going to touch on briefly here. So this is a high-level summary of the primary programs that we offer for startups. So if you look, sort of down at, let's say, like the well-architected I talked a little bit about. Connections is about helping you find maybe that first lighthouse customer. So we we actually go from the enterprise down as opposed to the startup up. But we go out and we talk to our enterprise customers and we say, what is a gap that you need to fill right now that you don't want to build yourself? What are you looking for? What type of services could potentially be filled by a startup? And then we will take that information out into our startup ecosystem and look for people that are potential candidates to help those enterprises. I want to double click on a couple of these basically. I won't just get into depth on all of them. I'm more than happy to talk about this stuff directly with you as it relates to you. So if something on here resonates, come and speak to me. But the ones I want to focus on here today, so this is the one exception to we don't invest directly in companies. So we do run an Alexa fund. If you are building a company around voice and Alexa skills, then there is an Alexa fund that will make direct investments in your company. So if that's an area that you're pursuing, I think that came up already today, then that might be something that is interesting to you. There is a public website for the Alexa fund, but that's also something that we can have a chat about. Also related to Alexa, we do sponsor a Techstars cohort. So Techstars is an international accelerator program. It's a fantastic program. Adam is in the Techstars Toronto program right now, and we'd be happy to talk to you guys about that, what that experience is like. An incredible organization, founder first, built around accelerating companies over a 3-month cohort to the next level. And we are a corporate sponsor of one of those programs down on the West Coast that is focused around companies that are building Alexa skills. So if you're already past the idea phase and maybe you're up and running, you're into MVP or product market fit, but you're looking for an alternative in terms of platform, we also have a migrate program. So what this allows you to do is get set up in AWS with some funding options that allow you to not pay for the same infrastructure to run in 2 places at the same time, basically. Right? So if you're an existing customer, either on-prem or at another provider, and you're interested in moving to AWS, we can help minimize the pain of that process for you. So not just from the technical perspective, but also from the funding perspective. So the main program, the meat of the startup organization is Activate. And this is sort of where I want to spend, I guess, the most time here. So Activate is the blanket program that we use to power startups in AWS. The most popular feature of Activate, unsurprisingly, is platform credits. So the sort of amount of credits that you're eligible for depends on the type of relationship you're in with the partner. So if you remember, I talked about incubation, acceleration, scale up, and beyond. You have access to a credit portfolio based on the type of program that you're operating in. So they're designed basically to give you what you need to experiment, to build a business, to not have to pay for your infrastructure for the level of growth that you're at. And then as you sort of move through that ecosystem, like you may start at an incubator and then move to an accelerator, and each time you make another step like that, you have access to more credits on the platform. So we help you, so operate cost-free from an infrastructure perspective. We also offer our business support free, which is a fantastic resource that people who are in the sort of build phase of a business can leverage to get somebody on the phone, break fix, immediately help them with problems, troubleshoot things at 2 o'clock in the morning, because startups never sleep. So that's an amazing benefit for the startups that are in there. There's some training credits, and then on the people side of things, we have the office hours program. So this is where both technical office hours and mentor office hours take place. So we bring some of those resources that I talked about in the past. So myself, other members of our technical team, subject matter experts in particular services, business development experts, fundraising experts, and we sit down with you and really try and figure out how we can enable you to move forwards. We also try and find ways to promote you in the community. So we run events like the Toronto Summit. reInvent in Las Vegas is our big customer conference every year. If you've ever been to that, it's a bit of a spectacle. We have things like Startup Day in Toronto as well. And we're always looking for customers and startups especially, to get up and talk about their experience, right? And to showcase the work that they've done and the success that they've had, and to help spread the word about them. So Collision Conference is coming up in May in Toronto. It's the first time it's going to be here. It's normally run in New Orleans. I highly recommend checking that out. It's going to be an incredible experience. And we are, of course, a big part of that as well, and we're looking to bring some of our customers up on stage there too. So, we go out of our way to try and find ways to shine light on the startups that are in the program. So I mentioned, or I sort of alluded to the fact that you participate in this program by being in one of these accelerators or incubators or working with a VC. And that is the way most of the companies participate in this. There are also programs at universities, like George Brown has Start GBC, so you can get into the Activate program through those. But there is also the possibility of direct to startup. So we don't have a sort of public direct to startup program that we talk about on the website. But if you are a startup, you're bootstrapped for now, you have plans, but you haven't taken on funding yet, that doesn't mean that we're not interested in helping you. So reach out to the team directly, to me, and we have a little conversation about where you are in your journey and where you're going, and then we find a way to get you into the Activate program as an independent startup as well. So don't think that this doesn't apply to you just because you're not in one of these programs. All it means is we just have to have a little chat about what's possible. So I mentioned Adam is here at as well. So he is in the Techstars Toronto cohort right now. They are a serverless success story for us. So they will hopefully come back and talk to you guys at length about what their journey has been about and how they've built their platform. But take some time in the sort of networking and mingling section here. Adam, can you just raise your hand? If you have questions about what it's like to actually operationalize a startup built completely on serverless, awesome guy to talk to. They just went through a sweet rebranding exercise as well. So this is Door. Then these are the obstacles that they were trying to overcome, right? So all the things that we spend time talking about here. Don't pay for resources when you're not using them. Minimize your cost structure in experimentation. Scale bursty traffic without having to think about it, and without having to feed and water your servers or your infrastructure. So they have built an incredibly strong and growing startup. They went from 0 to production application in 3 months, and they're doing this for less than I spend on Starbucks every month. So great example, great use case, and they're more than happy to share their story with you guys. So that's really all I wanted to talk about today. I didn't want to sort of drag you into a sales pitch of any kind. The message here is awareness, right? So awareness that there is an entire team in Amazon that is dedicated to seeing startups through to success. We see a lot of startups living at that edge of technology, right? So in the serverless space, love it. Always looking for new examples of companies that are being successful and building on AWS in that stack, so that we can help you both gain awareness for yourselves and be successful on the platform as well. Happy to take any questions.
So this is perfect, thank you.